is, of course, Palmo on the cover here. With him is the kind of stupa, which is called Kadampa stupa. He was the founder of the Kadampa tradition, which should not be associated what is now called the new Kadampa tradition, which should be avoided at all costs. But the old Kadampa tradition, which was started by Palmo in itself, it died out, but it was absorbed by all the other traditions. And this kind of stupa here is particularly called a Kadampa stupa. So then the next two verses, 5 and 6, they are basically dealing with the same problem that, you know, people who are difficult for whatever reason, what to do. Everybody on 5 and 6? Number 5. Whenever someone out of envy does me wrong by attacking or belittling me, I will take defeat upon myself and give the victory to others. One very famous, I think, one very famous Lama, just reading those two lines about I will take defeat upon myself and give the victory to others was such an extraordinary idea that he dropped everything and went off to find a teacher who could teach this. And after traveling around for many years, he found somebody that was Chekawa, I think, and eventually wrote a very famous book on Lojong. So when anybody says out of envy or for whatever reasons really, does me wrong by attacking or belittling me. So normally when people criticize us or say bad things about us or in any way try to get the better of us, our natural response is to defend ourselves and to try to turn the tables on them. And so here it's saying, basically, why bother? You know, there's so much, everybody has to be the victor. Why not let them be the victor? If that makes them happy, it's yours, you know. This has practical applications. Quite recently, a friend of mine, her father died, and he left his money to her and her brother, who he himself is very wealthy, the brother, but as often happens when you have wealth, your only thought is to get more wealth. And so he wanted to take her to court to contest the will, which of course would then be years and years going through the courts and endless lawyers, fees, and so forth. And so she remembered this verse. And she thought, if getting all this extra money on top of the millions he already has is going to make him happy, let him be happy. You know, I can get on with my life without all this extra money and without all the hassle. So she just said to him, okay, you take it. If you want it that much that you're willing to take your sister to court for it, then it's yours. Take it, be happy. And so she got on with her life. But if she felt, oh, this is so unjust, which it was, nobody's saying it's just. But if she if she clung to that idea, this is very unfair, this is very unjust, actually I'm quite a poor woman, and he is so wealthy, why does he want something which my father intended that we both should have? If he wants to take me to court, I'll fight him every inch of the way. She would still be caught up in that, you know? And the only person that ever gains from these law courts are the lawyers, as we all know. And so she just cut it right there. Okay, if you want it, it's yours. Be well, be happy. So in many cases, actually, to just do that just solves the problem. Then you can go on instead of trailing all this stuff with you. Oh, why did he say that? Why is he doing that? That's so unfair. I don't deserve it. You know, how can I get my own back? Then, in the end, as they say, we do to ourselves what only our worst enemy would wish for us. Because we get endlessly embroiled in all these things. And whether we win or whether we lose, in the end, in that way, we lose. So, also, when people say bad things about us and criticize us, we should ask ourselves first, well, is what they are saying true? Because if it's true, and maybe we hadn't noticed it, but they did, then thank you very much. You know, you have put a light on a floor which previously was in darkness. I didn't see it. Now I see it, so thank you. And then if it's not true, then why worry? I mean, you know, it's not true anyway, so that's their problem. That's how they see it. And, you know, if that makes them happy to think like that, then let them be happy. And then, you know, we can just get on with our lives. We don't have to carry all this stuff with us. Because in any life, you're going to get people who are going to support you, and you're going to get people who are going to create problems. And if we just endlessly magnify the problems and we get caught up in that, then, you know, our whole life ends up being a problem. And we are, as I say, are doing to ourselves what only somebody who really wishes ill towards us would wish for us. Why are we doing that? Whereas if we remain equanimous and say, you know, whatever you say, whatever you think, that's your opinion, you're very welcome to it, be well and happy, and just carry on, then how does it harm? As I said the other day, there's a story where the Buddha is going along and he meets this farmer who berates the Buddha for being a shramana, for being an ascetic, and says, look, here I am, I'm working, I'm plowing my fields, I'm sowing my seeds, I'm watering my crop, and at the end of the day, I get something from it, whereas you lazy so-and-so, what are you doing? Nothing. You're just going around begging from everybody else, or hard workers. If you want to eat, you go and plow. And so the Buddha said, well, if we offer somebody a gift and they do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong? So, of course, the farmer said, well, to the giver. And he said, okay, I do not accept your criticisms and your abuse. And I mean, that's it. Then the Buddha could walk on, and then the farmer went, But if the Buddha turned around and started deriding him for leading a worldly life, and why wasn't he having higher aims, and so and so and so and so, then it would have just carried on forever. So all of us, you know, if the easiest way, if there's an argument, is let the other person have the victory. Okay, fair enough. Maybe we could say, well, personally, I don't necessarily agree with you, but fair enough, that's your opinion. Maybe you're right. Then that's the end of the argument, isn't it? I mean, of course, sport would collapse. But, you know, beyond that, in daily life, very often, what does it cost us to say, okay, you may be right? that's, what can they say? That's the end of that. If we are not endlessly defending our own position, then end of argument. So, although it seems a little, I don't know how it seems to you, but actually it's a very skillful way of also dealing with most of the conflicts we have. It's just to let the other person have the victory, okay? If that's how you want it to be, then it's yours. Be well, be happy. Go on. Why do we always have to win? Maybe handing the other person the victory is the best way to win any argument. And likewise, even when someone I have helped, you see, it's something, you know, that really hurts the heart. You know, someone I've helped and whom I place great hopes, and then they turn around and bite me. You know, like a dog that you've been petting or a cat, and then suddenly it turns around and, you know, oh. I will view that person as a true spiritual teacher. The reason, again, is because when we do something for somebody and we take care of them and we have lots of hopes in them, an underlying motivation is that they will be grateful. And that, therefore, they will always like us and be nice to us because we've been so kind to them. And therefore, when they turn around after all that and show this non-gratitude, or they do something which really hurts us, and you know, we think, well, we did so much for you, how could you do that to me? Then that shows us very clearly, first of all, our underlying egoic motivations, and the fact that we cannot just accept them how they are because we are still hoping they're going to do what we want them to do and not do what they want to do. And for this reason, because it shows us so clearly our own underlying selfish motivations, even when we think we're being so kind, it's like a spiritual teacher, right? Because spiritual teachers, likewise, are not always kind. If a teacher is always kind and you know, always says and does the things we want them to say and do, that might be very cozy, but it's probably not a good teacher. A good teacher is able to point out our flaws and to sometimes be, you know, in return for all our devotion and all our you know, support, they can turn off and slap us down. And so in this way, we recognize that if they do that for a good reason, then they are genuine teachers for us because they are helping us. Just as if you have a child and you only give in to the child so that the child will keep smiling and love you, you are not actually a good parent. Because sometimes you need to be sharp with that child, you need to deny that child, you need to be difficult with that child, and that way the child will learn. So in our ordinary life, also with people that we really believed in, that we really trusted, sometimes when they turn against us, even though that's not what we would wish for them, and we're not condoning that they turned against someone who is helping them, nonetheless, it does illuminate for us our reaction, right? If we feel hurt and upset, it reveals to us our attachment and also our underlying, you know, that there is this feeling that if we do things for people and are kind to people, they in their turn have to be grateful and nice back to us again. And so this shows us how even when we do things which seem like really very good, it's often still from an underlying selfish motivation. So when that happens, then we should be grateful that they've pointed this out for us, even if they didn't intend to. Nonetheless, we have to then become more patient, still love them, still give them compassion, and in this way they become our spiritual teacher. Do you see? So what he's trying to say the whole way through is that when things are difficult for us, and when people don't do what we think they should do, and when circumstances don't go the way we think circumstances should go, instead of despairing and getting upset and angry or full of self-pity, we should, really inwardly strengthen ourselves and feel they are teaching me something. This is a lesson here, which I need to learn. Because if I don't learn it now, it's going to keep coming back, replaying itself until I do learn it. So what is this trying to teach me now? Let's try and pass this exam so we don't have to come back and repeat this lesson again. So when we meet with people who are difficult, maybe there's a reason for it. Maybe we really need to learn these lessons. So if we learn it in this lifetime, we don't need to keep coming back and repeating that one again. Isn't it? Because otherwise inside we are angry, frustrated, humiliated, revengeful. And that kind of state of mind is very, very uncomfortable. And at the end, it just closes us off from being able to reach out and trust people. So this is why it's very important to recognize that the difficulties that we meet in our life are often our best opportunities. That we think everything, as I said this morning, should go nice and smooth and no challenges. But actually, spiritually speaking, that is not the very best thing for us to happen. So naturally, we don't want to spend all our life being miserable. But when we do reach a hard patch, and maybe our whole life is going to be a hard patch, but it's only one life in a series of so many, then, okay, what can I learn from this one? Because we ourselves have created all the causes and conditions, and it's there for us to really use all these causes and conditions to spiritually evolve. Just recently I was doing a weekend on what is called the Therigatha. The Therigatha is a series of verses from the time of the first nuns under the Buddha. So the original verses are about 2,600 years old. There is a male version called the Theragatha. Thera, or Theri means an elder, so a monk or a nun who have been ordained for 10 years or more. And so there's a collection of the monks' verses, but there's also this collection of the female voice. And along with, and all of them are verses which eventually deal with their liberation. So all of these verses which were collected are of what are called arhati, female liberated women. And in around 600 AD, this was of course from the time of the Buddha, so we're about 600 BC, but about 1,000 years later, they collected the various commentaries, etc., and it was all written down, with the stories behind each of these verses. Who were these women? Often they name themselves and make some play on their lives. But one scholar called Dharmapala, he actually collected them all together and wrote the little bios that go with these women. And so we see that they were really a very cross-section of society of those days. The only thing they had in common was the times in which they lived and the fact they became nuns and they became liberated. Beyond that, they have nothing in common. Some of them were princesses, some of them were prostitutes. Some of them had married and had many children. Some of them had never married. Some of them were widows. Some of them got permission to leave home. Some of them came to the Dharma when they were very young, some when they were very old women. What they have in common is that they all strove very hard and got liberated. But many of them, in their biographies, you see, they had many, many troubles, many, many problems. And some of them lost their children, lost their husband, or their husband was abusive, or they were very, very poor, or some were very, very wealthy, but then they were married after somebody they didn't want to marry, and so forth. But some of them were very happy. They just wanted to be nuns, that's all. But a lot of them, they had very troubled backgrounds, whether rich or poor, and how they used that as an incentive to go forth, to really look into the root cause of their problems, which wasn't just other people and external circumstances, but their own clinging mind, their own self-cherishing mind, which was the real root cause of their problems, and how they were able to let go and from that to become liberated. So this ability to take whatever happens to us and make use of it, when good things happen to us, then we can use that as, like, you know, fuel on the path. And when we hit a wall of real problems and difficulties and people disappoint us or turn against us, people we thought were so trustworthy and kind, suddenly they turn round, and like a snake, they bite us just when we think that they're, you know, they're the most friendly of people. Rather than just putting the blame on them or on muling to ourselves and you know, getting depressed and unhappy and you know, just upset and angry and all these other very negative emotions, we can say, okay, this happened, I didn't want it to happen, but it's happened, okay. Now what can I learn? How can I use this? How can I take this onto the path? Because if we really understand that anything which happens to us can be used, spiritually speaking, then, you know, it helps us very much to get beyond hope and fear. Because we're always hoping things will go right and worrying that things will not go right. But if we recognize that inwardly we have the strength, the courage to deal with whatever happens when it happens, then, you know, that gets rid of so many of our worries. I mean, as Shantideva said, you know, when something happens and there's a solution, then why worry? And if there's no solution, then what's the point of worrying? That gets rid of a lot of troubles. So then he says, in brief, directly or indirectly, I will offer help and happiness to all my mothers and secretly take upon myself all their hurt and suffering. So, of course, all my mothers means sentient beings in general. The idea being that we have had so many rebirths in so many different forms throughout universal time, that at some point or other, everybody has been our mother. I mean, even if it's, you know, somebody who gives off hundreds of babies. Anyway, at some point or other, we have been very closely related to all beings. We don't even remember who we knew last time, and next time when we meet up again, we won't recognize each other. So the idea is that throughout beginningless time, we have all been very intimately connected with each other. We don't remember. The mother is chosen because the mother is the closest to us. Without a mother, we cannot be born. The father's role is rather extraneous. But the mother, she carries the baby for so many months, and then she gives birth with great challenge to her own life and in great pain. And then when the baby's born, she feeds it from her own milk. And even though the baby itself is pretty useless, you know, blah, 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 you know, I mean, mother feeds it, she cleans it, she looks after it, she cherishes it, it's her most dearly beloved, even though baby has not much conversational skills and is only thinking of its own health and happiness. But the mother loves it more than herself. And so that degree of selfless love, when after all the baby's not giving much back except trouble, and yet the mother cherishes it as dearer than her own life, is used as an example of how close we have been at some point with all beings in a way that we could never repay. And so therefore he says, directly or indirectly, whether we know it or whether we don't, I will offer all help and happiness to my mothers and secretly take upon myself all their hurt and suffering. So this is a reference to a popular Tibetan practice which was introduced into Tibet by Atisha and the Kadampa Geshes, which in Tibetan is called Tonglen, which means giving and taking. And this is this again is one of those practices which everybody does. It hasn't anything to do with any particular lineage or tradition or high lamas versus ordinary people. Everybody knows this practice and uses it. Many high lamas at the time when they're suffering and about to die, when people ask them, what practices are you doing, Rinpoche? They usually say Guru Yoga and Tonglen. So we'll do a little Tonglen practice here. I'm going to explain to you what to do first. Okay, so basically, I mean, it has many different ways that it can be used. But the basic practice, as he says here, is that we visualize somebody, preferably somebody we care about to begin with, somebody that we love, who is suffering. They're suffering through physically, through sickness, or emotionally, psychologically, in any way. Think of somebody that you care about who is suffering. Now, either you can be in their presence. For example, if we visit somebody in hospital, you know, very often we visit someone in hospital, we sit there, we feel completely useless, we don't know what to do. Well, now we know what to do. We're going to do Tonglen. And many people have reported that when they just sat quietly, I mean, you don't have to sit like this, right? You just sit there very quietly, doing your Tonglen practice, that afterwards, even nurses and doctors coming into the room remark on how the atmosphere has changed. And the person to whom it is directed says how much better they feel. It doesn't mean that they're going to be cured, but They just feel psychologically so much better from this practice. So the basic idea, okay, so you have somebody who's either sick physically in front of you or someone that we're just imagining. At home, you can, if you have their photo, that could help. But anyway, somebody who is, for example, sick. So what we do is on the in-breath, as we breathe in, we visualize that we are taking from them all their sickness and suffering and all the causes of their sickness and suffering, not just physical causes, but karmic causes and conditions which created the time when they're suffering. And so it's like a vacuum cleaner going, right? You're sucking up all that sickness and suffering and its causes in the form of dark light. And then we visualize that it comes in through the nostrils, it goes down into the center of the chest, called the heart center, the heart chakra here. And at the heart chakra, there is a little black pearl, very black. And that represents our self-cherishing mind. That represents the mind which is thinking, I'm really sorry you're sick, but I'm glad it's not me. Right? Many people ask, oh, this is very nice practice, but it doesn't really work, does it? Right? I mean, yes, of course we want to take in people's sufferings, but not really, if that means I'm going to suffer. So this little black pearl of self-cherishing mind, that all that dark light of their suffering goes in there. And as it enters into that little black pearl, it dissolves that pearl. Because the ego, the last thing the ego wants is other people's suffering. So if we are willing to take in their suffering, that dissolves the ego. And then immediately it transforms into like a very bright pearl, which represents here our Buddha nature, our true nature of the mind. Of course, Buddha nature is not a little pearl, okay? But for the sake of our visualization, we are seeing that black pearl of self-cherishing mind transforming into a bright, brilliant pearl, which is our true nature. Our true nature is totally beyond suffering. Our true nature, however much darkness we call in, can never be polluted, even for 1 second, right? That is infinite well-being, infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, infinite joy. Never, 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 never. If we took in all the sufferings of the world, we wouldn't even tarnish it, right? So then, with the out-breath, we imagine from the center of our being, all our well-being and happiness and healing comes out in the form of golden white light, melts into the person that we are visualizing or who is lying in front of us, and permeates every cell of their being to heal them, right? So with the in-breath, we take in all the darkness. With the out-breath, we breathe out all the light. And in one way, it's sort of I tell this story just to illustrate the power of mind and pure aspiration. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, I lived in London, and my mother kept a shop. But because she was sick, she had kidney stones, and kidney stones are extremely painful. And so she was upstairs in bed. And so I was playing with my ball, and I had a nylon dress on, and it caught into the electric fire. And next thing I knew, I was up in flames. So I remember running up the stairs, of course screaming, covered in flames, and running into my mother's bedroom. And then she, of course, put out the flames. She wrapped me in a sheet with some penicillin. She said later that my whole back was just one great big blister. And meantime, I was lying on her bed, and I lost consciousness, of course. And then I was just above, looking on the ceiling, looking down. And then all these beings of light saying, "Come with us, come with us." So I thought, oh, good. Now I'm going to die. Well, that would be interesting. Let's see what happens. And I very much wanted to go with these beings of light. I absolutely did not want to go down into my burnt out little body down there. But then next thing, the neighbors had heard the screams. So they started coming in to find out what had happened. And then suddenly I found myself back in my body. Then the next thing I remember is lying on this trolley in the hospital, and the doctor saying to me, "You're a very brave little girl. You must be in tremendous pain." And I said, "No, there's no pain." And he sort of looked at me, but didn't say anything. And so I was in hospital for weeks and weeks. And my whole back was burned off. And, you know, even if we burn the tip of our finger, how painful that was. My whole back was burned off the side of my face. There was no pain. I was too young to realize this was strange. And the nursing staff assumed I was being terribly courageous. Such a brave little girl. But actually, I remember enjoying myself in hospital because I felt fine, except, you know, I had to have a cage over me and things like this, but there was no pain. And I don't have any scars. And years later, I spoke to my mother about it, and she said that when I was lying on the bed, unconscious, she thought I was going to die. And so she prayed, and she said, "Please don't let her die. And please don't let her have any pain. She's too young for that pain. Give all her pain to me. I will take her pain. Let me have it. Let her be free of pain." My mother already was in agony with kidney stones, but if she could have taken my pain as well, she would have rejoiced if I could have been free. As it happened, she didn't take the pain, but neither did I. I think something decided, okay, that's a very pure aspiration, let's help. So she was doing Tonglen without knowing Tonglen existed, right? She would have welcomed my pain and my sickness if I could have been free. That is a mother. You know, a mother will gladly give her life for the sake of her child. So that's the kind of aspiration we're trying to engender here. Okay, that genuine desire that even if I have to take it all, if they could be free, how wonderful that would be. Okay, so you remember, you take in the dark light, it hits this self-cherishing mind, dissolves it, it transforms into our true nature, which is purely compassion and wisdom, and from that the light goes out and completely pervades the sick person. And so we keep repeating that with the breath. Keep taking in the dark, giving out the light, okay? So maybe we can sit there for 10 minutes and just try to think of somebody. In the beginning, it's very good to think of somebody that we particularly care for, because otherwise, you know, we don't really believe it. And then it has many other applications. For example, if we ourselves are sick, then we can imagine taking in all of that particular sickness from all the people around the world onto ourselves and sending out healing to all those beings who are sick, that we are willing to be substitute for all those beings. If whatever our sickness is, we would gladly bear it 1,000,000 times if all those other beings who have the same sickness could be freed from it. So in that way also, if we're sick, instead of lying there feeling sorry for ourselves, we can really make use of it as a means for opening up the heart and really making a lot of progress on our spiritual journey. But here we're just going to keep it very simple. Think of somebody you care about and their troubles, and then imagine how wonderful to be able to take that from them, and they're relieved from it. And I will take that from that on my behalf. I'm happy to take it for them. But it doesn't just sit there in our hearts, it immediately transforms into our innate fearless courage and our compassion and wisdom, which goes out to completely engulf them in every cell of their being. Okay, can we do that? So the last verse says, I will learn to keep all these practices untainted by thoughts of the 8 worldly concerns. So the 8 worldly concerns are gain and loss, fame and disrepute, praise and blame, and pain and pleasure. So mostly we want gain and praise and pleasure and a good reputation. And so a lot of what we are motivated by is order to gain these things, to gain a good reputation, to gain more material goods, to, and therefore to be able to get more pleasure out of life and so forth. And also in order to avoid those things which we don't want, like loss and blame and a bad reputation and anything painful, anything which is unpleasant for us to have to deal with. So much of our actions, even on the spiritual path, is motivated, underlying motivation is towards all of that we should gain pleasure and avoid anything unpainful, in other words. And so therefore he's saying, let's try to practice with going beyond all of that pleasure, pain principle, the gain-loss idea. Let's just practice for the sake of practice and not worry about whether or not this brings us rewards in the sense that we normally think of rewards. That maybe at the beginning we will end up feeling worse. You can't tell, But we are not doing this in order it's going to make us feel better. We're not doing it for the sake of pleasure. We're doing it for the sake of finding the truth and waking up. So, for example, back to these nuns at the time of the Buddha, many of them gave up great wealth and became, in those days, monks and nuns were like, some of the more ascetic kinds of sadhus. They were barefoot, they didn't have nice monasteries and nunneries. They really did go on alms round, insofar as nobody was waiting at the roadside, as in Buddhist countries nowadays, with their best food to offer to them. They just ate the leftovers that, if they could manage to gather something. And they wore rag robes, and they just wandered the streets of northeast India, and it was a very hard life. They had given up, many of them had given up so much, and outwardly they had gained so little, but inwardly they had gained enormously, to the point where quite soon they became liberated and completely freed from the whole round of birth and rebirth. So in that sense, they were not looking for any of the things which we might hope to aspire for. They were not looking for worldly happiness. They were not looking for people to praise them and admire them. They were not looking for any kind of material gains at all, and or worldly concerns. They simply had gone beyond all of that. And because they were able to let go of all their concerns, which normally motivates us very much, that we want people to praise us and to speak well of us, and that we hope it's going to lead to nice things happening, and that we will get something from all this. And to undercut all of that and just absolutely focus themselves completely on letting go, letting go, letting go, until they were able to also let go of their delusions and their ego and attain to liberation. So this is more or less what he's trying to encourage us towards, and of course we are doing the best we can within who we are. We are not, these are always, practices for very high level bodhisattvas. And, if it was that easy, then we would all be very high-level bodhisattvas. But nonetheless, they set the example there. This is what we're aiming towards. This is what we aspire towards. And we know it is possible. And if it's possible for others, it could be possible for us. If we just keep practicing. You know, it's like if you listen to a professional musician playing a classical piece, whether Western or Asian music. I mean, it is completely beyond our range. And yet, if we keep practicing and practicing and practicing, we also can play that instrument. We also can master that instrument. We may not be concert pianists, but we certainly can play enough that the music sounds very nice and people will enjoy listening to it. And so this is the point. You know, how does anybody get to a point of proficiency in anything? It's by practice. And so likewise, in our life, how do we begin to really make some progress on the path? It's by walking it. If we just sit there and go through all the things we need, we're still in base camp, you know, ticking off all the things we need for our equipment, but never trying to make the ascent, then, you know, what's it all for? So each one of us has our own path to travel. And some people go very, very swiftly, some people go very slowly. But as long as we're still traveling, that's the important thing. Whatever pace we get to, at least we don't give up. The saddest thing is not how slowly we're traveling, but whether or not at the end of it all we give up and say, I can't do this. That is a tragedy. But as long as we have sincere aspirations and we're trying, at whatever level we're at, then, you know, we will still keep going. So then his final lines are, may I recognize all things as illusion and without attachment gain freedom from bondage, indeed. So one of our problems with not being able to let go more than we do is because we think everything is so very, very real and solid and enduring. And even at the very basic level, we don't, in our heart of hearts, believe in impermanence. Not only not emptiness, but even impermanence we resist. So other people lose things, other people lose people, but not me. So that people are shocked. Even devout Buddhists are shocked when people that they love and are attached to become sick or die. Because even though we say impermanence, 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 non-attachment, 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 in our heart of hearts we don't believe it. It's for other people, not for me. And so we suffer. We suffer because we are grasping so tightly and we cannot hold gently and allow that. We do come into being and then we go. I mean, that's the way it is. It's been like that since the beginning of time. It will always be that way. However much people think that they can live on forever, we cannot live on forever. Relations don't last forever. They just don't. And as long as we do not accept that, we are going to suffer. It's not that it's good or bad, it just is. Many of the people who became nuns at the time of the Buddha, the stories were of women who had lost their children, their babies, or their young children, and they were frantic. Some of them went completely crazy, wandering around, people throwing stones at them, mad women, from their grief, because If they lost their child, then their family didn't want them. Maybe their husband also died, or they got thrown out, they had nowhere to go. I mean, it's not just 2,600 years ago, right? You lose everything and nobody wants you. And these women, they're not educated, they have no job, they have no money, they have no security, they have nothing. And so they wandered around crazy until they met with the Buddha. And the Buddha didn't say, oh, yes, isn't it sad, isn't that awful? He said, why, dear, the amount of tears that you've cried from the loss of your loved ones would fill the 3 oceans in all your lives. You know, come on, wake up. And somehow they found that comforting and renounced and became liberated, because they recognized, and of course also the story of Kisugotami going around looking for a handful of mustard seed from a household where nobody had died. The same message. Death and loss is universal. We might not like it, but it's how things are, and until we accept it, we are going to be pained. Once we accept it, then we can release.